If you're watching this, you're definitely a horror fanatic and we approve. Let us know where you're from and be a part of our community. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means everything. Let's start. When I was 12, winter was magic. Snow meant one thing: manhunt. Every January, me and my group of friends, Jordan, Milo, Trevor, and the twins, Casey and Craig, turned the neighborhood into a frozen battlefield. It was our tradition, no matter how bad the weather got. We'd split into teams, 3 versus 3, and turn hiding into an art form. That night, a blizzard blanketed everything. The streetlights bled soft orange over the untouched snow. It was bitter cold, our breath fogged in thick clouds. I remember feeling the wind on my face and thinking, this is going to be the best game yet. We drew teams. I was with Jordan and Milo. The twins and Trevor were seekers. Once the countdown started, we scattered like smoke. Jordan scaled a neighbor's fence, technically not against the rules, and vanished into the backyards on the next street over. Milo climbed onto Trevor's shed and tucked himself behind the roof's pitch, high ground. I had the dumbest idea. I zigzagged across the snow, stomping down random trails to throw the seekers off. I was so proud of myself, until I realized my trail would only lead them straight to the bushes where I was now hiding. I motioned to Milo to make a distraction if they got close. Sure enough, 2 shadows entered the yard, scanning footprints. Then Milo jumped. He landed in a spray of powder and bolted toward the street. The seekers gave chase. I took the opportunity to escape and decided to follow Jordan's path, hopping the fence to the other block. But when I landed in the yard, I didn't see Jordan. No fresh footprints either. Just a strange set of deep drag marks, like someone had shoved something or someone through the snow. I called out his name. No answer. The drag marks led toward a house. A dark one. No lights, no decorations, not even footprints to the front door. The trail ended at the back sliding door, which was slightly ajar. I stood there, frozen in place. My gut turned to ice. I was about to run for it, climb back over the fence, when I heard it. The door slid open behind me. I turned just in time to see a figure step out onto the porch. He was tall, wearing a black coat, hood pulled low over his face. I didn't wait. I screamed Jordan's name at the top of my lungs and sprinted, boots slipping over the slick snow, toward the fence. I heard him stomping behind me, gaining. I barely made it over. My coat snagged on the top, and he almost had me. I hit the ground hard, but kept running. All my friends came running into the yard after hearing my scream. Jordan wasn't with them. I told them everything. Jordan's parents came out, confused and panicked. His dad grabbed his shotgun and stormed across the block while his mom called the cops. We watched from the front yard as he banged on the dark house's front door. No answer. He opened it. It was unlocked. A few agonizing minutes passed. Then he came out carrying Jordan in his arms. Jordan was unconscious. His face was red, his lips split open, and a welt ran across his cheek like someone had hit him with something heavy. He woke up in the ambulance, confused, crying. There was no car in the driveway. Whoever the man in the coat was, he'd fled when I escaped. The house turned out to be a foreclosure, long abandoned, but someone had been squatting there. Police found chains in the basement. The man who took Jordan was never found. To this day, that yard is empty. The house has been boarded up since. But sometimes in winter, I walk past that block, see the fresh snow on the porch, and wonder who else might be watching through those dark windows. Last winter, I took my wife Eliza up to the 10-mile range in Colorado for a week-long retreat. I'd booked a secluded rental cabin, something off-grid and atmospheric, perfect for my landscape photography. Eliza, an avid skier, was thrilled too. The idea of cuddling up in a snowbound log cabin sounded idyllic. The place itself was modest. A squat, four-room structure tucked between dense rows of pine. One bedroom, a compact kitchen, a cramped living room, and a bathroom with hot water that took 10 minutes to kick in. No TV signal, no Wi-Fi, and with the storm rolling in hard, even cell reception was dying out. That evening, just before twilight, I told Eliza I wanted to grab some snowy footage outside for a project. She was curled up in bed with her tablet, warm under layers of blankets, and just murmured, "Don't be long." I zipped up, slipped on my boots, and stepped into the flurry. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Not mine. Not hers. Two sets of boot prints had already made a semicircle around the front of the cabin. One trailing up to the front steps, pausing at the door, then veering off to the right. I stared, the wind biting at my cheeks. My breath fogged the air, but my chest felt suddenly cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. Someone had been here. But when? I followed the tracks cautiously. They looped around the side of the cabin, pressing up to the bedroom window. I looked in. There was Eliza, absorbed her screen, legs tucked under the quilt. I waved. She looked up, smiled, and waved back. I forced a grin and kept walking. The tracks curved around to the far end of the cabin, toward the living room windows. Another pause. Another set of prints close to the glass. Whoever it was had been watching us. I should have turned back. Should have bolted inside. But I followed the trail. The steps continued deeper into the trees. I moved slowly now, 1 foot at a time, heart pounding louder than the snow crunching under me. The woods swallowed the cabin behind me. The pines grew dense. Then I saw him. A man, dressed in black, not moving, just standing, slouched slightly, facing a tree as if in prayer or grief. His hood was pulled up, his face hidden, snow gathered on his shoulders undisturbed. He hadn't moved in a long while. I stood behind a tree, peeking around, unsure whether to call out or stay quiet. Something told me not to speak. Eventually, I started walking backward, one careful step at a time, keeping my eyes on him, barely breathing. When the trees finally gave way and I saw the cabin again, I turned and ran. Eliza knew something was wrong the second I slammed the door behind me. I must have looked ghost white. I didn't tell her everything, just that someone might have been near the cabin. She didn't argue. She locked the door, checked the windows, made sure everything was sealed. The night wore on. The wind howled against the cabin walls. I could hear the snow pattering softly against the windows. What if he's still out there? Eliza whispered. There's no way. I said. We laid in silence for a while, letting the storm drown out our thoughts. Then came a knock. Soft, deliberate, right on the bedroom window. We both heard it. I grabbed Eliza's hand and whispered for her to stay quiet. The lights were already off. We crept into the living room in the dark, where the storm muffled our footsteps. Another knock, this time from the opposite side, the living room window. He was circling the cabin again. We had no weapons, just our coats, our keys. I whispered, "Forget everything." We run to the car. We slipped on our boots in the dark. I took a breath, then flung the door open. Snow slammed into our faces, wind tearing at our coats. We sprinted to the Jeep. I hit the unlock on the key fob like my life depended on it. The lights blinked on, and there he was, standing at the side of the cabin now, not at a window, not looking at us, just facing the wall, like before, as if hiding his face. The car started on the first try, thank God. I drove through the storm, down the mountain trail to the ski resort a few miles away. We spent the night in the lobby of a hotel under 2 bright lights, drinking bitter vending machine coffee and shivering long after the cold had left us. We went back the next morning. Nothing was stolen, nothing broken. But there, on the windowsill of the bedroom window, were a line of small pebbles arranged in a perfect circle. He'd left something behind, or marked something. We left and didn't come back. I still don't know if he was just a wanderer, someone disturbed, someone lonely, or something else. All I know is he never moved. Not once. And that was what scared me the most. When Ellis turned 24, he wasn't thrilled to still be living at home. But with student loans piling up and the world grinding to a halt thanks to the pandemic, options were limited. His parents had just bought a house on the outskirts of Winthrop, a sleepy, fog-draped town on the edge of a forest preserve. It was the kind of place where the streets got eerily quiet after sunset, and neighbors didn't wave much. The house itself was big, almost too big for their family of 5, and Ellis was offered the basement as his bedroom. It's not really meant for sleeping, his dad had said with a shrug. But hey, you'll have your own space. Ellis didn't mind. The basement was finished, sort of. Cold concrete floors, exposed ceiling beams, and a room that was clearly meant to be a utility space. But it was private, and that mattered more than anything. Within a few nights of moving in, he started hearing things, soft thuds inside the walls near his bed, like something shuffling or bumping around behind the drywall. Probably just the pipes, he told himself the first time. Old house stuff, but the noises didn't stop. They shifted. Some nights, it sounded like fingernails gently scraping the wall. Other times, like a soft thump, low and rhythmic, coming from the vent near the corner. One night, while lying in bed with his phone, Ellis heard a distinct noise, something like a heavy mug being placed on a wooden table, coming from just beyond the thin wall that separated his room from the rest of the basement. He paused his game and walked toward the noise. "Mom," he called out softly, already knowing it wasn't her. The room was empty. Shrugging it off, he went back to playing. A few nights later, around 3 a.m., he awoke parched. His water bottle was empty, so he trudged upstairs to the kitchen. As he descended the basement stairs again, something made him stop, an instinct, a whisper in the gut. He turned his phone flashlight on and scanned the basement. "Liam," he said quietly, wondering if his younger brother was trying to prank him. No answer. He walked back into his room. As he set the freshly filled bottle down on the shelf above his bed, he paused again. The vent. That same stupid vent. Something made him look. He raised his flashlight toward it, and in that single flicker of light, he saw them. Eyes. Wide. Pale. Watching. For a half second. Maybe less, someone stared back through the vent, then vanished. Ellis's scream cracked through the stillness like glass. He sprinted up the stairs, bellowing for his father. They all came down, groggy and annoyed. "There is someone looking through the vent," Ellis insisted, shining the light into it again. "I saw eyes. I swear." His dad peered in. "There's nothing, El. You're just tired. Probably imagined it." Ellis didn't argue. He wasn't sleeping in that room another night. He crashed on the living room couch, locking the basement door behind him. The next day, he hesitantly went back downstairs. He wanted to convince himself he was wrong, that it was all stress and isolation playing tricks on him. But as he examined the wall more carefully, something caught his eye, a faint seam like a door frame. And it was ajar. Ellis called for his dad again. Together, they pulled open a hidden door masked behind drywall panels and insulation. Behind it was a narrow crawl space, barely wide enough for one person. Inside, there was a threadbare blanket, a chipped wooden stool, and the unmistakable stale odor of sweat and mold. A small, crooked hallway led down to the interior wall that bordered Ellis's bedroom, and there, in the shadows, was the back of the very same vent. "Jesus Christ," his dad whispered. Someone had been living in that little compartment, watching, listening. Ellis felt bile rise in his throat. He staggered backward, gripping the edge of the doorway. The realization struck him like a freight train. Those thumps, the whispers, the eyes, they weren't dreams or imagination. Someone had been living in their walls. "Do you think he's still here?" Ellis asked. His dad didn't answer right away. "He's gone now," he finally said. Had to be, but Ellis never saw any signs of forced entry. No broken locks. Nothing missing. Just silence. As if the intruder had always been there. Hidden. That night, Ellis didn't sleep at all. Every creak in the house, every shadow in the corner of his eye, it all felt alive. Watching. Waiting. He moved his bed upstairs the next day, into the living room. The basement door stayed locked from then on, but Ellis knew it didn't matter. Locks only keep honest people out. And at night, when the wind howled through the trees outside and the floorboards whispered beneath unseen steps, he'd stare at the ceiling and wonder if the eyes behind the vent had ever really left. It was April 2020, and the world was unraveling quietly behind drawn curtains and masked grocery trips. For Dev Malik, it was a strange time to be alive and a worse time to be alone. He rented the right half of a one-story duplex in a small Arizona town, surrounded by endless flat stretches of dust and heat. His landlord, an older man named Mr. Reagan, lived on the left side. Each side of the house had its own entrance and kitchen, but there was a single door inside, right by Dev's pantry, that connected the two units. It was always locked, or so Dev had thought. Mr. Reagan held the only key. There was something off about the man. Not dangerous exactly, but strange. He was thin, polite in a clipped way, always smelling faintly of rubbing alcohol. And his eyes were too wide when he smiled. Dev didn't like that internal door. It made him feel like the house had a secret, like he was sharing more than just a wall. So, on a whim, he ordered a motion detection camera online. One of those small, Wi-Fi connected ones that buzz your phone when movement was detected. He angled it directly at the door inside his unit. The thought of catching anything real on it never crossed his mind. Until it did. Dev was sitting in his car, parked outside the grocery store, scrolling aimlessly through his phone when the notification pinged. Motion detected. Side door, 2:07 p.m. He froze. His breath stopped short. Fumbling fingers opened the camera app. There it was, grainy and low frame rate, but unmistakable. The door slowly creaked open, and Mr. Reagan stepped through, expression unreadable, then disappeared off camera. Seconds later, he reappeared, shut the door behind him, and was gone. Dev sat motionless in the driver's seat, keys still in the ignition, watching the 30-second clip over and over. The timestamp chilled him. He'd been gone less than half an hour. He didn't rush in screaming. Instead, he drove slowly home, parked in the driveway, and stepped inside. Everything looked untouched. Nothing was missing. Not a drawer opened. No signs of disturbance. Still, the air felt heavier. That night, he stood outside Mr. Reagan's unit and knocked. The man answered in a soft cardigan, blinking behind thick glasses. "Hi," Dev said, trying to steady his voice. "Hey, I have a camera inside. It alerted me earlier. I saw you came through the door." To his surprise, Mr. Reagan nodded immediately. "Yes, I was going to leave you a note. I smelled something burning. I thought maybe your oven. I hadn't used it," Dev said quietly. I was worried," Reagan continued. "I didn't want to call the fire department and make a fuss. Nothing was out of place, so I left." His tone was calm, rational. The explanation technically made sense. Dev thanked him and went back inside. But that night, in the low light of his bedroom, doubt spread like mildew in his mind. Why hadn't Reagan texted him? Why not call? Why walk straight in? He tried to sleep, but every creak of the house felt like footsteps. 2 nights later, around 3 a.m., Dev was on a late-night Zoom call with a friend, headphones in, voice hushed. The laughter on the screen died instantly when another notification popped up. Motion detected. Side door, 3:03 a.m. Dev's blood iced over. He muted the call, closed his laptop, and stood up. The rest of the house was dark, silent. He stepped into the living room and saw him. Mr. Reagan, standing in the corner, near the wall, barely visible in the thin spill of light from Dev's bedroom door. He was facing Dev directly. In his right hand, he held something long, black, heavy. It glinted slightly. "Mr. Reagan?" Dev whispered, heart hammering in his chest. The man didn't respond, didn't blink. He just started walking, slowly, stiffly, like a puppet yanked upright. Each step echoed across the wooden floor. "Hey, stop. Seriously," Dev warned, backing into the bedroom. But Reagan kept moving, expressionless. Dev slammed his door shut and twisted the lock. Almost immediately, something heavy hit the door. Bang. Then again. Bang. The doorknob rattled violently. "I'm calling the police," Dev shouted. The pounding stopped. Silence. He waited, pressed against the door for minutes that felt like hours. Finally, he cracked it open and peered out. The living room was empty. The connecting door was shut. When the police arrived, Reagan opened his side calmly. His hands were empty. His posture relaxed. "I don't remember any of that," he said, blinking slowly as the officers questioned him. "I've been sleepwalking. Medications. It's gotten worse during the lockdown." Dev showed them the footage. The camera had captured everything. Mr. Reagan entering, standing silently, walking forward. But the resolution was too poor to see what he'd been holding. The officers asked if Dev wanted to press charges. He looked at Reagan, who was staring at the floor now, trembling, whispering something about dreams he couldn't wake from. "No," Dev said. "Not yet." But the moment the cops left, Dev shoved his dresser against the connecting door, screwed the feet into the hardwood floor, and didn't sleep that night. Or the next. He started hunting for new places immediately. As of now, he hasn't seen Reagan again. But every night, as he lies in bed, he remembers the way Reagan moved. That look in his eyes, like something else had taken control. Sleepwalking, he'd said, but Dev didn't buy it. Because there was one detail the camera hadn't caught. When Reagan turned away, there was a smile on his face. Cabin fever had its claws in everyone by late spring of 2020. Isolation turned boredom into madness. And for 3 old friends in the small town of Heather Ridge, that meant one thing: trouble. Jasper, Mark, and Trey had been best friends since middle school. Now in their early 20s, the trio had returned home to ride out quarantine in the dull rhythm of closed parks and endless Netflix. That was until Trey said the words that would tilt their world. "You guys remember the Girard farm? Out by the ridgeline." Everyone knew the place. A collapsed relic of a farmhouse tucked deep in the woods past Route 11. Locals whispered about it, mostly to scare kids. The owners had vanished decades ago, leaving the house to rot beneath the weight of broken windows and time. "We go tonight," Trey said, "just for something to do." It took less than 10 minutes to get there in Mark's beat-up Honda Civic. They parked just off the gravel trail and approached the house, flashlights slicing through the trees. The Girard farm rose like a black wound out of the earth. Crooked roof, twisted porch beams, and windows that gaped like eye sockets. No one said anything as they climbed the porch. Breaking in was pathetically easy. One hard kick, and the rotted wood frame of the ground-level window gave in. They climbed through into a choking darkness. The air inside was like a crypt. Dust floated in their flashlight beams like ash. The walls were stripped bare, wallpaper peeling down in long yellow tongues. "Smells like a damn grave," Mark muttered, voice low. "There's almost nothing left inside. No furniture, no photos, not even trash. Just silence. Long, swallowing silence." They split up without much discussion, each drifting into different rooms. Barely a minute passed before Mark came creeping back to Jasper and Trey, whispering harshly, "I heard something." "Where?" Jasper asked, tightening his grip on the flashlight. Mark pointed toward a narrow hall on the east side of the house. "In there, like whispering." "Yeah, all right," Trey laughed softly. "Real spooky." But even as he said it, Jasper noticed the hair on his own arms rising. Still, they had to look. That's what they told themselves. It was just a thrill. Just something to spice up a dead year. They moved down the hall. The wood beneath their feet groaned with every step. The walls seemed to close in, and the air got colder. At the end of the hall was a tiny room, completely empty, save for a narrow door. When they opened it, they discovered a strange two-way staircase. One set of stairs curling up, another descending into what should have been a basement. But when Jasper stepped closer, he realized the stairs going down were gone, collapsed into a gaping black void. Trey nudged him. "Bet you won't look down there." Jasper, shaking his head, muttered, "This is so stupid." But he knelt anyway, crawling carefully toward the hole. He clicked his flashlight on and leaned over the edge. At first, he saw nothing but concrete floor and splinters of rotted wood. Then, as he adjusted the beam, something took shape in the shadows, something human. It was a woman, an old woman. She was sitting in a broken rocking chair, barely visible through the dust and darkness. Her hair was long, gray, tangled like dead roots. She stared directly at Jasper, her mouth curled into a smile. Too wide, too still. There was no light down there. No reason he should have seen her eyes gleaming. But he did, and they were locked onto his. "Jesus, go!" he screamed, falling backward, flashlight skittering across the floor. Mark and Trey didn't ask questions. They ran. Trey was already in the car by the time Jasper and Mark burst through the front door, breathless and shaking. "What happened?" Trey gasped, fumbling with the keys. "She was down there," Jasper stammered. "There's a woman down there." "Who?" Trey's voice rose. "Nobody's lived here for decades. I saw her. I swear to God. She was just staring at me." Mark, pale and sweating, shook his head. "You saw her?" "I heard her. Whispering. I thought I imagined it." They drove in silence, the wind howling through a cracked window. No one said a word until they were miles away. Later, when they tried to talk about it, nothing added up. There were no stairs in that house anymore. How'd you get down there? How could she have been alive? They went back the next day, half convinced it had been a shared hallucination. The heat of fear, the thrill of exploring something forbidden. But when they reached the house, the front window was boarded up again. And inside, that narrow door at the end of the hall, gone. It was just wall now, seamless, like the house had healed itself overnight. Mark moved out of town that month. Trey stopped returning texts altogether. As for Jasper, he never slept with the lights off again. Sometimes, just before sleep takes him, he swears he hears the slow creak of wood, a chair rocking, and underneath it, ever so faintly, a whisper just for him, "I saw you two." In the back of a linen closet, wedged between forgotten Monopoly boxes and moth-bitten sweaters, sat a dusty relic, a Parker Brothers Ouija board, the kind with yellowed edges and a planchette that rattled when you shook the box. Alex had seen his whole childhood, always just out of reach, always ignored. It wasn't until he turned 9, while deep in a rabbit hole of ghost stories online, that he discovered what the strange board really was. It talks to spirits, he whispered to himself, breath-catching. That same night, he dragged the old box from the closet and cornered his older brother, Caleb, in the living room. "Please," Alex begged, "let's try it. Just once." Caleb laughed. "Dude, it's a board game." Still, curiosity got the better of him. They sat cross-legged on the carpet and placed their fingertips lightly on the plastic planchette. The living room lamp buzzed overhead, and outside, Wind scraped dry branches across the siding. "Is there anybody there?" Alex asked, his voice barely audible. The planchette sat still. "Can you hear me?" he asked again. Caleb grinned and moved the pointer in slow circles. "Oh, I'm a ghost," he said in a cartoonish voice. Alex shoved him. "Stop messing around." But nothing else happened. Eventually, they got bored and shoved the board back in the box. That night, Alex couldn't stop thinking about it. He pulled out his mom's laptop and read everything he could find. One sentence burned itself into his brain. The board is most active in candlelight. So 2 days later, while their parents were out and the house lay quiet beneath a gray drizzle, Alex lit 6 candles around the dining table. The flickering glow made the walls seem to breathe. Caleb sighed, but sat across from him again. "You're lucky I'm bored." They placed their fingers on the planchette again. Alex asked the question once more, slower this time. "Is there anybody there?" The pointer jerked slightly. Alex blinked. "Caleb, don't." "I didn't," Caleb whispered, eyes locked on his brother. "Move your hands," Alex said, heart pounding. Caleb lifted his hands. The planchette kept moving. First one letter, then another. Y, E, S. Alex froze. No way. He could feel it now. The coldness in the air, like the room itself had gone quiet beneath the silence. Caleb, now visibly unnerved, put his hands back on the planchette. "Are you a good spirit?" he asked. 5 seconds passed. Then the planchette slid across the board to the word. N. O. They both looked at each other. Something ancient and raw pulsed between them, an instinct older than language. Alex jumped up and ran from the room. Caleb stayed. He stared at the board, something compelling him forward, breath shallow. "Who are you?" he asked. The pointer started to move again. Before it could finish, a sudden burning pain slashed across Caleb's ribs. He screamed, knocking over one of the candles. Alex rushed back in to find his brother lifting his shirt, revealing 3 thin, fresh gashes across his side. Deep, red, and already oozing blood. "It scratched me," Caleb yelled. "Something scratched me. What do I do?" Alex stammered, panicking. "The fireplace," Caleb said through gritted teeth. "Light it. Now." Alex raced to the living room and started the fire. Caleb stormed in seconds later, holding the board. He didn't hesitate. He hurled the whole thing, board, planchette, box, into the fire. The plastic hissed, the cardboard curled and blackened, and a thick, acrid smoke filled the room. They watched it burn. Neither of them spoke again that night, and they never used a Ouija board again. Even now, years later, Alex doesn't talk about it. Caleb still has a faint scar, a strange, almost artistic mark like the curve of a claw. But what haunts Alex most isn't the scratches. It's what Caleb whispered to him in the hallway the next morning after a night of no sleep and pacing shadows. When I asked who it was about to spell my name. It started like most bad decisions do, with boredom. 16-year-old Nico had been staying with his cousins in Ash Hollow during the strange quiet of early lockdown. With nothing to do, they dug through their dad's basement, eventually unearthing an old Ouija board sealed in plastic and stinking faintly of mildew. It was Nico, his cousin Derek, Derek's older brother Ryan, and their friend Matt who set up in the basement that night, pulling the chain on a single overhead bulb that hummed and flickered weakly. They cleared the clutter off an old card table and laid out the board. Before they began, Ryan pointed at a large porcelain doll sitting atop a shelf. "That thing's gotta go," he said. The doll was almost 2 feet tall with tangled hair, cracked cheeks, and eyes that were just a little too human. They placed it face down on a folded towel in the laundry room across the hall, shut the door, and laughed about it. "We're such wimps," Matt said, forcing a chuckle. They sat at the table and placed their fingers on the planchette. Is there anyone with us? Nico asked. The planchette gave a few half-hearted twitches. Most of the answers were gibberish, random letters, nonsense phrases. After a while, Nico got up to use the bathroom. That's when things changed. While Nico was gone, the others asked, half joking, "Who's in the other room?" The planchette slid slowly across the board, spelling out 4, 2, 9, 7, 5, 3, 1. Ryan blinked. What the hell is that? When Nico returned, they showed him the numbers. He stared for a moment, then froze. That's my social security number. Silence fell. No one laughed this time. Ryan swallowed hard. That's impossible. We didn't even know that. They all leaned forward. Ask it something else, Matt whispered. Nico took a deep breath. How will I die? The planchette glided across the board with terrifying certainty. A-I-R-F-O-R-C-E. The Air Force. Derek whispered. Are you kidding me? That's not funny, Nico snapped. I've been thinking about it. I haven't told anyone yet. They stared at each other. Prove it, Ryan said suddenly, voice hard. Prove you're real. The planchette paused. They began to spell. D-A. They looked at each other. They, Matt said. Dad? What's? Then a sudden dread swept through them, like a change in air pressure. A cold, heavy stillness. Nico stood first. The doll, he said quietly. They all ran into the hall and opened the laundry room door. The doll was no longer on the towel. It was standing upright directly in front of the door, as if waiting for them, arms by its side, hair limp over its face, eyes wide and focused on nothing and everything at once. They all screamed. Ryan knocked the doll over and slammed the door shut. Matt was the first one out of the house, and the others followed, panting into the cool night air. Later that night, Matt returned alone. He set the Ouija board on the grill in the backyard and burned it, watching the smoke twist into the wind like fingers reaching for something lost. They didn't talk about it again for a long time. And yet, even after everything, after the board, the doll, the message, Nico did end up enlisting. A year later, he was stationed at a remote airbase in Europe. He writes home sometimes, but in one of his letters to Ryan, he slipped in something strange. It's quiet here. Too quiet. Like something followed me. Sometimes I wake up and that damn doll is in my dreams. Always watching. And I swear, I hear something whispering my name at night. Ryan never wrote back. There were 4 of them that night, killing time the way teenagers often do, by being dumb, reckless, and bored out of their minds. Sean was the one who found the Ouija board. He'd spotted it sticking out of a black garbage bag at the end of someone's driveway while biking home. The board was scuffed, water-stained, but intact, complete with the plastic planchette that rattled in its hollow casing like something trapped. He brought it to his friend Devin's garage that night. Riley and Marcus were already there, drinking warm sodas and watching YouTube on someone's cracked phone. Guess what I found? Sean grinned, holding up the board. Gross, Riley said immediately. That thing smells like death. That's the point, Sean said. They gathered around an old card table, pushed aside some toolboxes and junk, and placed the board in the center. At first it was all jokes, dumb questions, giggling responses, fingers pushing the planchette too obviously. Will Marcus ever get a girlfriend? Devin asked. The planchette slid to. Oh. They burst into laughter. But after a while, the novelty wore off. Marcus got bored and went to raid the fridge. Riley went to the bathroom. That left Sean and Devin alone at the table. Let's try something real, Sean said, more serious now. Devin raised an eyebrow. Like what? Sean took a breath and asked quietly. When will I die? The planchette was still for a long moment. They began to move. Oh. Sean narrowed his eyes. Dude, I'm not doing it, Devin said, voice low. M-O-R-R-O-W. The planchette stopped. They both stared at each other, hands still hovering above it. That was you, Sean said, trying to sound confident. No, it wasn't, Devin snapped. I swear. Riley came back and saw the looks on their faces. What happened? Nothing, Sean muttered, shoving the board off the table. But something had changed in him. He barely spoke the rest of the night. The next morning was overcast, unusually quiet. Sean leashed his dog, Duke, and took their usual walk through the edge of the woods near the old preserve. They were halfway down the gravel path when Duke's leash snapped clean in half. The dog took off barking, straight into the street. Duke! Sean yelled, sprinting after him. There was a flash of metal, a shriek of tires, and a horn that filled the world. Sean barely dove out of the way. The car clipped his ankle, sent him spinning into the ditch. His palms shredded on the gravel, knees bleeding. But Duke was safe, sitting calmly on the other side of the road, tail wagging. Shaken, Sean limped home. But that wasn't the end of it. That afternoon, while standing in the kitchen under the ceiling fan, Sean reached into the fridge to grab soda. Behind him came a sound, a sharp metallic screech, followed by a crash of glass. He turned. The entire ceiling fan had torn loose from its mount. It had landed on the dining table, splitting it in half, shattering every glass, every plate, and cutting deep into the wood like a blade. Sean stood frozen, inches from where it hit. If he hadn't moved when he did, it would have come down on his neck. 2 near-death moments. In one day, the same day the board had spelled tomorrow. Sean didn't tell his friends right away. He didn't have to. They saw the bruises, the bandages, the limp. That night, he burned the board in a metal trash can behind school, watched it curl and blacken until only ash remained. I'm never touching one of those things again, he told Devin. Neither of them argued, because there are 1,000 ways to die, and sometimes something else chooses one for you. When you're 17 and alone in the house for a weekend, there's usually only one thing on your mind: freedom. For Tanner, it wasn't parties or booze. It was something darker. A heavy storm had rolled in that Friday night, flooding the gutters, rattling the windows, and painting the neighborhood in wet shadows. His parents were away in the city, and his younger brother was off at a Boy Scouts campout. That left Tanner alone. And the one thing he couldn't stop thinking about was the dusty old Ouija board tucked behind the Monopoly boxes in their hallway closet. He'd seen it 100 times, but had never dared touch it. Until now. There was something about the rain, the wind, the way the lights flickered just once when he passed the kitchen, that made him feel like this was the perfect night. Ritualistic. Charged. He set the board on the dining room table, turned off all the overhead lights, and dimmed the hanging lamp until only a low, orange glow remained. The windows shuddered with every gust of wind. A single candle flickered on the far end of the room. Tanner placed his fingers gently on the planchette. "Is there anyone here?" he whispered. "Nothing. Does anyone want to talk to me?" Still nothing. He stayed like that for 20 minutes, asking questions that went unanswered, staring into the unmoving plastic. Eventually, he sighed and packed it up. His curiosity deflated into mild embarrassment. He went to bed around midnight. The storm had quieted to a steady drizzle, but the wind still moaned around the eaves. As Tanner settled under the covers, the house creaked and groaned like it was shifting in its sleep. That's when he heard it. Creak, a sound from downstairs. The front door area. He froze. A pause. Then again, closer this time. Creak thump. Tanner sat up, his ears strained in the dark. He tried to explain it away. Maybe the storm had pushed something loose. Then he heard it. A footstep on the stairs. Someone, or something, was moving upward, slowly, one step at a time. There was no one else in the house. No siblings, no parents, and no explanation. He slipped out of bed and reached for his phone, but this was before he had one. The landline was downstairs, right near the front door. Another step, closer. Tanner clutched his blanket and pulled it to his chin, backing against the headboard. His door was cracked slightly, just enough to see the hallway. The footsteps stopped, right outside his room. Then silence. He didn't breathe, didn't move. Every second stretched like a thread ready to snap. Then flash. A crack of lightning lit the entire hallway in white. And in that moment, just a flicker, he saw it. A shape. Long, thin, black limbs, too thin to be human, curling around the edge of the doorframe, like they were testing the air. Then the door slammed shut. Tanner screamed, a raw, animal sound that ripped through the silence. He dove under the covers, shaking, teeth chattering, heart pounding so loud he thought it would give him away. Nothing else happened, but he stayed hidden under the blanket until the first hints of dawn bled through the curtains. Eventually, he peeked out. The room was empty. He crept downstairs, checking every window, every door. All locked. No signs of a break-in. No muddy footprints. No misplaced shadows. But there, sitting quietly back on the dining table, was the Ouija board. He hadn't left it there. He hadn't even brought it upstairs. He stared at it for a long time. Then, without another thought, he grabbed the box, sprinted outside in the rain, and hurled it into the trash bin. He dragged the can to the curb, far away from the house. That was the last time Tanner ever touched a Ouija board. He doesn't talk about that night. Not really. People wouldn't believe him. They'd laugh it off. But sometimes when storms roll in and the wind pushes at his window panes, he swears he can still hear it. A step, a pause, another step, and the whisper of something waiting just beyond the door. It was summer 2013, and the heat in Brady's apartment seemed to cling to everything. The air was thick with dust and sweat. The fan pushed nothing but warm air, and time felt stuck. He wasn't expecting anything strange when his friend offered a trade, a vintage Ouija board in exchange for a game Brady had grown tired of. "It's the real deal," his friend said. "Like actually old. Some collector stuff, maybe worth something." Brady didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in flipping weird junk online. So he agreed. When he brought the board home, he barely glanced at it. The box was faded, stained on one corner. The planchette was wooden, not plastic, light and splintered along the edges. He dropped it on the floor beside the couch, planning to list it on eBay the next day. That night, something small shifted. Brady had 2 potted plants on his coffee table. When he woke up, both had toppled over. Dirt smeared across the carpet like someone had dragged their fingers through it. And the board was sitting on the coffee table, placed neatly in the center. He frowned, bent down to clean, and tried to rationalize. The fan, a dream, sleepwalking. Still, it bothered him enough that he took the board upstairs and tossed it into his bedroom closet. He told himself it was just a fluke. But that night, he couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned for hours, the sheets sticking to him, the whir of the ceiling fan masking every creak of the old building. Just when he started to drift off, he heard it. Click. A soft, unmistakable sound. The switch of a light. He opened his eyes. Through the crack in his closet door, he saw a thin strip of light. His closet light was on. He stared, frozen. "I didn't turn that on," he whispered to himself. Brady got up and walked slowly across the room, heart pounding in his ears. He opened the closet door. No one was inside. Just the board lying there on the floor, slightly angled toward the door. Its planchette sat on top, pointing upward. He flicked the light off and shut the door firmly. Back in bed, he stared at the ceiling. He waited. 10 minutes passed. Then, click, the light was back on. He looked again. The glow was faint but undeniable. This time, he didn't open the door. He sat in bed, watching a strip of yellow light, too afraid to move. But what came next wasn't just a light. All the lights in his room turned on. At once, the ceiling light, the bedside lamp, the hallway bulb through the open door. They all flared, filling the room in harsh, cold brightness. And Brady knew he wasn't alone. He grabbed his keys and ran out the door barefoot, heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't even bother grabbing his phone. He sprinted across the complex parking lot and sat behind the wheel of his car, doors locked, panting. When he returned hours later, just after sunrise, everything was off. Silent. He marched up the stairs, yanked the board from the closet, and stuffed it in a garbage bag. On his way to work, he tossed it into a dumpster behind a gas station. Nothing strange ever happened again. But sometimes, when he's lying in bed with the closet door cracked open and the house is too quiet, Brady swears he hears something. The soft slide of wood across carpet. A click, a glow behind the door. And he knows, if he ever looks, the light might be on again. The house on Fenwick Street looked like it had been forgotten for decades. Overgrown weeds devouring the porch, windows dull with grime, and a gnarled chain-link fence bowing inward like it was trying to collapse into itself. It sat directly across from where Jordan and his best friend Tyler had just moved in. It was 2008. The neighborhood was cheap, the rent cheaper, and for two broke 20-somethings working dead-end shift together, it felt like the best they could do. The first few days were filled with laughter, beer on the front stoop, and unpacked boxes they didn't have the energy to deal with. But the house across the street gnawed at them. Something about it was wrong. Their neighbor to the left kept to himself. A wiry old man with stringy gray hair and yellow-tinted glasses named Morris. He'd wave sometimes. Other times, he just stood at his window, staring. The second night there, as the sun dipped below the rooftops and a warm breeze stirred the trees, Jordan sat on the steps, cigarette burning low between his fingers. Tyler was beside him, scrolling his phone. Then Jordan froze. "Dude," he muttered. "Don't move." "What?" Tyler glanced up. "There's someone in the window." Jordan pointed to the upper floor of the abandoned house across the street. Tyler looked, but saw nothing. Jordan's voice shook. "They were just there. Eyes. Staring right at us." "Could have been your reflection," Tyler said, but there was no humor in his voice. Jordan shook his head. "It wasn't me. It ducked away when I pointed." They both looked across the street for a long time, but the window remained empty. Lifeless. They ran to Morris's house. They could see him clearly, slouched on his couch in front of a small TV. Jordan knocked. No response. "Morris, something's going on across the street." Still nothing. Just the glow of the TV washing his motionless face. "Morris!" Tyler shouted again, louder. The man turned slightly toward them, but didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stared. "Okay," Tyler muttered. "This place is officially messed up." Back at the house, tension crackled between them like static. They paced, debated calling someone. The police? Their landlord? But what would they say? It was Tyler who finally snapped. Screw this. He retrieved a katana from his closet, something he bought at a flea market years ago and never used. A joke item. Not tonight. They waited for darkness. Then, flashlights in hand and adrenaline rushing, they slipped across the street and into the backyard of the crumbling house. The rear door was held shut by a loose plank, which Tyler pried off easily. Inside, the air was thick with mold and dust. But oddly, the house was intact. No graffiti, no damage, no trash, just empty rooms frozen in time. Jordan whispered, "It's cleaner than our place." The first floor was small, kitchen, living room, dining area. Nothing moved. No signs of life. They turned to the stairs. "Let's check up there," Tyler whispered. But then, for no reason, he shouted, "Is anyone up there?" Jordan's eyes went wide. "Dude, what the hell?" Silence. Then, thunderous stomping overhead. Heavy, fast, moving toward the top of the stairs. Jordan felt his heart drop, like gravity had shifted. "Go!" Tyler shouted. They turned and ran, bursting through the back door and across the street, lungs burning. As they reached their porch, both turned. Morris was standing at his window, watching them. No expression, just watching. They locked every door, every window. Sat in the dark, backs against the wall. Neither said it, but they both felt it. Whatever was in that house wasn't alone. The next morning, they packed everything they could into Jordan's rusting hatchback. When the landlord asked why, Tyler muttered something about work, distance, just not the right place. They drove off without looking back. Jordan never told anyone about what he saw that first night. The eyes in the window, the feeling they weren't just watching, but waiting. And sometimes, even now, when he dreams, it's the sound that haunts him. Stomping, heavy and fast, getting closer. On the far edge of Griffin State University, tucked behind rusting fences and overgrown hedges, stood a cluster of buildings known simply as the Flats. They were dorms once, cheap brick boxes built in the 70s, but now they sat hollow and abandoned, sealed by plywood and time. No one really knew why the school shut them down. Some said it was asbestos. Others claimed something happened there. Murders, hauntings, buried secrets. The truth was nobody cared enough to dig. And that was exactly why Micah wanted in. He called himself an urban explorer, but really he just liked creeping into forbidden places, chasing the adrenaline and telling stories afterward like a badge of honor. The Flats were perfect. Security had gotten tighter on campus recently, but on a cool Wednesday night in October, Micah pulled on a black hoodie, slipped a crowbar into his backpack, and made his way through the shadows behind the math building. He scoped out the perimeter and found a first-floor window with only a few nails holding up the wood. 20 minutes later, thanks to a little brute force and a lot of silence, he slipped inside. The room was musty, stale. Wallpaper curled at the corners. A moldy mattress lay slumped in one corner, and the walls were stained like they'd been crying for years. Micah flicked on his phone flashlight. "Basement first," he muttered to himself. There was a story, half remembered from Reddit, about a faceless figure that haunted the basement. Supposedly, he would only appear when you were alone. Micah smirked. "Come get me then." He found a stairwell at the end of a long, rotting corridor. Every step creaked beneath his weight. The smell thickened the farther down he went. Wet wood, mold, and something else sweet coppery. He reached the bottom and pushed open a metal door. It opened into a large, empty room. Concrete floors. Exposed pipes overhead. Cold, damp air. Nothing moved. Micah swept the light across the walls. There was another door on the far side. Smaller. Probably a laundry room, he guessed. Just a quick look, he told himself, nerves starting to bite. He approached and slowly turned the handle. The door opened. He recoiled. The floor inside was soaked in red, thick puddles that shimmered in the beam of his light. A drain in the center was clogged with what looked like hair, bone, maybe teeth. The walls were bare, but on the ceiling, in dark paint or maybe something worse, was a 5-pointed symbol. Jagged, uneven, a black pentagram. Something moved in the corner of his eye. He turned, but there was nothing. He ran, up the stairs, down the hall, through the broken window. He didn't stop until he was back in his dorm, lungs on fire, hands shaking. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, his roommate was gone, off to class. Micah finally drifted off, briefly, before waking to a soft rustle. A single sheet of paper had been slid under the door. In wide, blocky red ink it read, "Did you like what you saw?" Micah stared at it for a long time. At first, he thought it was a prank. Someone followed him. Maybe security. Maybe a friend messing with him. But nobody had seen him go in. Nobody even knew where he was that night. And as he read the note again, one word looped endlessly through his mind. How? He kept the paper, taped it to the back of his closet, hidden behind coats. He never went near the flats again. But sometimes on sleepless nights, he wonders what would have happened if he had opened that second door just a little wider, or stayed just a little longer. Eli never thought much about the house next door. It had been empty since before he and his parents moved into the cul-de-sac, just a sagging, neglected structure half swallowed by weeds and shadows. Boards covered the lower windows. A faded "no trespassing" sign tilted sideways on the fence, barely clinging to a single nail. But every night, from his bedroom window, Eli could see its upper floor. He was 16, restless, and half the time home alone. His room faced the abandoned house, and in the dead of summer, he kept the window open at night to let in the breeze. Sometimes, when the wind was quiet and the air hung still, he thought he could hear something from that house. Voices, moaning, faint creaks. At first, he told himself it was just the wind, or maybe teenagers breaking in to drink or hook up. But then came that night in late July. He was home alone again, lying on his bed with his headset off and the TV muted. Something about the silence made his skin crawl. That's when he heard it. A scream. Not a long one, just a short, sharp burst of sound, like someone being surprised or hurt. It came from next door. Eli sat up instantly. He killed the lights, shut off the TV, grabbed his airsoft gun, more of a comfort item than an actual weapon, and climbed out his window, dropping into the backyard. Heart pounding, he hopped the fence into the overgrown yard of the abandoned house. The back door was unlocked. He knew that already. He and his friends had explored the place once months ago. This time, it was different. He opened the sliding glass door as quietly as he could and stepped inside. It was dark, completely dark, the kind of blackness that feels like it's pressing against your eyes. He clicked on the flashlight attachment on his gun and scanned the living room. Empty. Everything was gone. No furniture, no trash, no sign of anyone living or squatting there. The only sound was a soft, steady creaking. It was rhythmic, repetitive. He moved deeper into the house, the beam of his light slicing through dust. The sound was coming from the basement. The door was open. He paused at the threshold. Every instinct screamed at him to leave. But something stronger, curiosity, maybe pride, forced him forward. He descended the steps, slowly, one at a time. The creaking grew louder. When he reached the bottom, he swung the light across the room. There, in the center of the basement, was a rocking chair, and someone was sitting in it. All Eli could see was the back of a head, long, thin hair matted against pale skin. The moment his flashlight hit it, the chair stopped. He didn't wait. He turned and ran, stumbling up the stairs, nearly dropping the airsoft gun, slamming the basement door shut behind him. He burst through the back door, hurdled the fence, and didn't stop until he was inside his house, locking every door and window. Panting, he rushed to his room and looked out the window. Across the yard, the upstairs window of the abandoned house was open. Someone was standing there. Eli froze. It was the same figure, watching him. No movement, just silent, chilling stillness. He slammed the blinds shut and called his dad. His voice shook as he tried to explain, but his dad only sounded mildly concerned. "Are you sure it wasn't just some local kids?" he said. "Still, I'll call the police. Just in case." Eli hung up and peeked through the blinds again. The figure was gone. When the police arrived, they searched the house. Found nothing. No signs of anyone living there. Nothing disturbed, except for one thing. A single wooden rocking chair, in the center of the otherwise empty basement. No footprints, no fingerprints, no explanation, just the chair. Eli didn't sleep for days after that. Even now, he avoids that side of the house. But sometimes on hot summer nights when he forgets and leaves his window open, he swears he can hear the creak of wood, back and forth, and he knows it's waiting for him to look again.